WROI, and we are now going to go to the phone lines, and we are going to welcome State Representative Bill Friend to give us an update on the state government actions and the session that just ended and the short session that's to come. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Good to be with you, Barron. Haven't talked to you in a while, so...
well, you've been a busy man.
Yeah.
I want to get to here in a little bit, talk to you a little bit about your career, because this, as I understand it anyway, is your last go-around in the state legislature. But what did we accomplish, and what do we still need to accomplish so that we're coming back? I think it's the first time in 9 years.
Yes. Well, we did accomplish a few things, contrary to what might be read or reported in the news. But the first thing we did, which was very important, was to make sure that public schools were funded adequately and without any decrease. Last year, when we did the budget, we underestimated the number of students in public schools by about 6,300 students. So the appropriation was set at a certain level, and if there are more students and the money follows the student, there was going to be a shortfall in every student's allocation. First thing we did was transfer enough money to take care of that appropriation so that public schools would be made whole. I'm talking K through 12, that those schools would be made whole and there would be no decrease in their appropriation. We also have worked on workforce development. That's a serious issue for us in Indiana because we have jobs. We have many jobs that go wanting because we don't have the personnel and the employees who are skilled in certain manners in order to get things done. So we're reorganizing workforce development. All those programs are going to be looked at in a different way. There's something called an Employment Aid Readiness Network intern program. Earn Indiana is a need-based program providing students access to internships and offering employers funds for hiring these students. And some of these programs will be administered through Ivy Tech or Vincennes University. So we're trying to make our workforce match up with the employment opportunities that are out there. So that's the second thing we did. You also know that we did really earth-shattering things like Sunday alcohol sales. You know, you can now buy alcohol on Sunday between noon and 8, Sunday afternoon. And we also declared the Say's firefly as the state insect. So we've done some things that are important.
Well, somebody ought to notify the United Nations about that one.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, there's a whole effort by the cutest fourth grade class in the world from Lafayette, and they come down there. They've been doing it for 4 years, and you know you can only say no to those children so many times, and so we took it seriously, and the Say's firefly is our state insect now. It goes along with our state flower, our state bird, state soil, state rifle, all of that sort of thing. So,
okay.
You know, it's one of those issues that has been there 4 years, and we got it done. One of the things, probably my biggest personal success, was making CBD oil, which is made from industrial hemp and has a 0.3% THC level or less, making it available to the general public so that it can be used as an herbal supplement. This has been an ongoing issue for the last several years. We've been listening to parents come in with emotional testimony about their children who are suffering from treatment-resistant epilepsy. And these kids have seizures, sometimes 100 to 200 a day, and they have to wear bicycle helmets, and the doctors put them on these strong pharmaceutical medications, sedatives, barbiturates, other sorts of things, and they turn the children into zombies, and they don't mature, and they don't develop, and can't have a normal life. And the CBD oil seems to be effective in a high percentage of cases in controlling these seizures. And we passed that bill a year ago for the children, and this year with Senate Bill 52, I was able to help marshal it through the process, and CBD oil is legal to own, possess, retail, use in the state of Indiana. So I'm very pleased to have that done.
One question I have about that, and not necessarily about the oil, but about the plant, because one of the things that will drive people who know about botany crazy is when people say hemp and marijuana are the same thing. They are not. And hemp has had a lot of industrial uses over the years, many of which could alleviate some problems that we have. Is it legal to produce hemp industrially if you want to make rope, or you can make plastic out of the oils of it and all this other stuff? Is the hemp plant legal to be harvested in Indiana?
Not really. The only place that can be done is Purdue University. We've cleared them to do research, and this summer there will be a summer study committee to study the industrial hemp plant. And you're correct, Barron, that hemp and marijuana are both in the cannabis family, and yet they are vastly different. Industrial hemp has an extremely low THC level, and THC is that compound in marijuana that gives the euphoria, the high, the intoxication. And with an extremely low THC level in the industrial hemp, up in northwest Indiana, they've had this stuff. They used to grow it to make rope and canvas and paper and other manufacturing products. It helped us win some world wars, by the way.
Yeah.
And then Congress, in its wisdom, put all cannabis on Schedule 1, which means all cannabis would be in the same category as, cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin. And so the hemp plant finds itself indicted by being a cousin to marijuana. And we really need to make the distinction that industrial hemp is a viable product and could be a crop that would be harvested by Indiana farmers and then Indiana processors could manufacture it into the various products that it's useful. And the confusion with the marijuana is unfortunate. It really is, because hemp is a valuable plant.
Yeah, I suppose the analogy would be is if, the poppies and flowers that most people grow in their gardens around here are distantly related to poppies in Afghanistan, say, that they make heroin out of, but they are not the same. And you can't go out into your garden and just grab a flower and do that. And correct. Indiana used to produce a lot of hemp. I mean, this was a pretty serious crop that people grew across the Midwest, as I understand it. You're the farmer. You know more about it than I do, but that's what I've read.
There was a serious market for it because the federal government and the military needed it. And we needed it for rope and canvas. When we were in those wars, we had to have those materials for the soldiers to help them succeed. And so, but once it got put on that Schedule 1 list, it, became a illegal substance. And there are many states who have done what we've done here in Indiana now to make this legal. And of course, the governor signed the bill last week. So it's a legal product, and people will be able to obtain it probably at a natural food store, a health food store, someplace like that.
Now, you mentioned the governor, and you were talking about workforce development. Our governor, and I think I've said this to you before, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that makes outlandish statements on a regular basis. He has warned that up to 47%, I believe, is the figure he used, of the jobs that are out there now are going to be automated. And I know when you and I were kids, you'd see fields full of people baling hay and detasseling corn, and that's gone by the wayside. I got a niece at Rose-Hulman, and I keep telling her, if you can engineer a combine head that can pick tomatoes and melons without destroying them, you're going to make a lot of money. And are we ready for all of this that's coming agriculturally, factory? manufacturing, and even some of the service sector, as we see, we're delivering fast food in some places now via drones.
Well, as I spoke earlier about the workforce development changes that are coming, we are also establishing the Governor's Workforce Cabinet, and that'll replace the Workforce Innovation Council. And this is a new, smaller member board, and it'll be comprised of representatives of workforce agencies as well as business and community leaders. And as we are trying to move our workforce forward into this age of automation and technology, one of the bills that died on the calendar, and we'll get into that here in a little bit, Barron, but one of the bills that died on the calendar was autonomous vehicles. These driverless vehicles, whether they be trucks, cars, buses, whatever, they're being tested in various parts of this country right now. And, General Motors was a big player in this legislation all session long, and they were dealing with Chairman Soliday, Ed Soliday from Valparaiso, who used to be vice president of United Airlines. He was vice president during the 9/11 disaster. So I give you that as background, that Ed Soliday knows something about transportation and is pretty expert in dealing with large companies. And he had real trouble because the folks at General Motors wanted to be unrestricted in their testing and production of autonomous vehicles. In other words, Barron, you could see one driving around in Denver, driving around in Rochester, driving around in Peru with no driver if General Motors has their way. And they have this vision in the future of all these driverless vehicles that each one of us, as a person, if we need to go somewhere, we just call Uber and they show up and get us. Well, I just think that's a flawed vision for the future. There will be some truth, but as is with every case, there's usually some kind of compromise, or we meet in the middle on some area. And I don't know, the autonomous vehicle thing is really kind of spooky to most of us, and one of the unintended consequences is that there's a whole lot of jobs that go away, that people who drive and hold those steering wheels, if they're no longer needed, what do? And then secondly, there's going to have to be a whole lot of people trained in technology and computers and satellites in order to make those things work and work effectively. Just last week there was a woman killed out west by an autonomous vehicle. It was an Uber, but it was driverless, and it hit a woman on a bicycle. And the satellite can't tell you everything, so there's a whole lot of research that needs to be done. We were simply not ready to make General Motors a free agent and unrestricted. We've got to have some regulation if we're going to test these things.
Well, you mentioned the jobs that would be lost. While you were speaking there, I started counting, and there were at least 15 semi-trucks that went through downtown Rochester. And From my memory, you tell me if I'm wrong, but even in economic downturns, if there was any industry where somebody could get a license to do it and that they were going to have a job, it was as a truck driver, and our highways are full of semi-trucks. If we start delivering things with robot-driven vehicles, even if they make them absolutely safe, I'm asking you asked the question, what do we do with all these people? Because a guy my age, 55 years old, has been driving truck all his life, is not going to turn around and go out and become a computer programmer. You know that. I know that for the most part. So what are we going to do with them?
Most of us, Barron, can barely use a smartphone.
Well, I never did learn to use VCRs before they went extinct. So,
okay.
So what do we do with all these people? I mean, and that's on top of all the other people that are being automated out of jobs.
No one had an answer. That's what I'm trying to tell you, that if General Motors had their way and they could just have a free rein to test and produce autonomous vehicles, they really don't have an answer about what happens to the employment picture when those jobs disappear. Now, they're also talking about doing this, with railroad, with trains, just like you would run an electric train on a set in your basement. Someone would be sitting in an office with a joystick looking at a computer screen, and they could make that train do whatever they wanted it to do. And the folks in the railroad industry are objecting strongly. They want at least a couple men or employees on that locomotive to make sure that there is some measure of attention given by a human being. And I know that there's resistance out there, and this all comes back to paying wages and benefits and insurance, all that sort of thing, to the human element, to employees. That's what industry always tries to do, is to cut costs in order to become more profitable. And so that's why they're looking at all this automation, the robots in factories, the satellite guidance on tractors and combines as they go across the field. They reduce the amount of labor that's required even in agriculture. So it's
and then tell you that it's not really your tractor, so if you fix it, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're right. You're probably right there. But that's why maybe that's one of the reasons I've decided to retire, that all this technology is kind of getting ahead of me.
Well, when they were talking to you, did they mention anything at all about security? Because the next nightmare is if you have a highway full of semi-trucks that are being driven by computers, how hard is it to hack into that and just cause all the mayhem you want to?
Well, and then what if we have this big event up in the sky that takes care of all the computers in the world, and we have a big major blackout, which, you can shut down our electrical system, you can shut down the grid, you can shut down everything. And, then we would be back to getting along like the cavemen did, because very few of us are familiar with the basics anymore. We all got too many conveniences.
Yeah. Again, speaking with State Representative Bill Friend, now you have announced your retirement at the end of this session, yes?
Yes, I have. And
how many years does that make?
26. This is my 26th year in the House of Representatives, but before that, I was a local official, county auditor.
I can remember when you were in my county government.
Yeah, and so I've had a total of 40 years in county government, all the while hanging on to the farm. And so, that's also a priority of mine, is making sure that we have the farm and have it available to the next generation. And so far it's working. But hasn't been without struggles over the years, as with everybody. You had asked about special session. Our session ended, the statute in Indiana code says that in short session we have to be done March 14th. That's it. So at midnight on March 14th, we were in the middle of a large argument with members over about 6 different bills, and time ran out, and we couldn't go on any further. And there are some bills that are pretty important. One of them is, one of the reasons the governor is calling us back, the bill that would keep Indiana in compliance with the Federal Revenue Code. We don't need to be out of compliance because it causes a lot of bookkeeping headaches for businesses and individuals. They'll have to figure their taxes twice, and that's just not acceptable. So we need to come back and take care of that item. There's also a need in the Muncie and Gary schools. We did not get that bill addressed, and the governor is proposing that we loan Muncie schools an additional $12 million. That's going to cause some debate because Muncie schools advertised for and received a $10 million capital projects bond. They were supposed to be building something, and they put the money in the general fund and used it for operations. That is not legal. You can't be doing that. And then up in Gary, those schools are underwater about $190 million, and they've actually withheld taxes from paychecks and then not forwarded them to the IRS, to the federal government. So there are some major problems in those two school districts that need to be addressed. Muncie the management is going to be with Ball State University. They're going to manage those schools. And up in Gary, there is an independent manager who has been hired to make difficult decisions and make some changes up there to try to right that ship. So that bill needs to be addressed in order to get some stability in those two school districts. And there are two or three other, mostly pertaining to taxes and property taxes and things of that nature that should be addressed by the legislature. And that's why we're supposed to go back in mid-May.
Well, I guess the question I would have about that is, I was at Ball State in the 1980s, and the schools then got headlines on what a disaster they were. So why is it taking so long to fix the problem? And as far as Gary goes, how do you get away with withholding taxes and not sending it to the IRS? How does that happen?
We all raised that issue. We all raised the question. I mean, you're a school. You're not a business or a private individual. This is a school. It's the last place you would think that they would even try that, much less, have it happen. How would you like to be the teacher who is having taxes withheld from your paycheck every 2 weeks, and then when you go to your tax man to get your taxes figured, he says, well, no one's paid any taxes. You haven't paid any taxes on your salary, and it's because the school district didn't forward them on to the IRS.
Oh, my goodness.
Wouldn't that be an awful dilemma? I think it would, and that's what we're trying. I don't know. You put off solving these difficult problems as long as you can. I'll tell you this. I was presiding over the House as Speaker Pro Tem when we heard this bill on the Muncie schools and Gary schools. And in the House version, I've described what was going to happen. The management of Ball State was going to be administered on Muncie schools, and as I was presiding over the House, the criticism by the Democrats and the people in Muncie and Gary was that we were taking away their constitutional rights by turning their school board into an advisory board and actually hiring different management to oversee the finances of the school district. And they said that it was unconstitutional for us to do that. Well, it's also against the law for them to practice what they've been doing with their financial mismanagement. So we need to make sure that we get some of this handled in a statutory way so that we can hopefully get these schools back on the right track to the best of our ability. One of the things up in Gary that's a real problem, and this is no surprise to anyone, but over 20% of their homes in Gary need to be demolished. People have walked away from them. They've turned them over to the county government, to the commissioners, to the tax sale, and then they've fallen into such disrepair that they just need to be torn down. It's a situation much like up in Detroit, where when the auto industry went downhill and they had whole neighborhoods that were blighted. And it's very similar to that in Gary right now.
If Ball State ends up taking over the Muncie school system, are there going to be guarantees that the kid that takes out a student loan to go to Ball State's not going to have their money spent on the local high schools there?
I would hope that there would be no commingling. I can't imagine that. Muncie schools will have a revenue stream, but the person or the individuals who manage that revenue stream will be out of the Ball State administration.
Okay.
And you can't commingle college student fees along with K-12 monies. That won't happen. I have confidence in that.
Okay.
And, I mean, they're going to be under the microscope. There's going to be a light shining on them all the time. So they're going to have to do it properly.
Okay.
But I don't agree with the governor's recommendation of let's give them another $12 million. That's just putting good money after bad, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, if they get into the thing with Gary, is it something where they can get into it and start dictating how they run their town? Because I know you mentioned Michigan. One of the things we saw in Flint was that you had some parts of town, the really expensive parts with the nice golf courses, that were getting water for nothing while people were getting billed 2 and 3 and 4 times, including the schools, what they normally would have got to try to make up the shortfalls. Is that, would the state be saying to Gary, look, clean up your entire act because this affects that, and it's not alone in the world?
Well, Gary has been struggling. We gave him casinos years ago, thinking that was going to pull him up out of.
I remember that.
Out of the doldrums, and it hasn't worked. I mean, the steel industry. You have to look to what President Trump has been talking about with tariffs and trying to protect and bring back our steel industry in the United States. If that is to happen, perhaps up in Gary, the United States Steel and Bethlehem and the others, some of them that are bankrupt and closed down, perhaps some of those can make a comeback. And if that's the case, then employment will increase and the city will improve again.
Okay. Real quickly, I know we've taken up a lot of your time. Looking back over your career, what would you say is the biggest change that's happened during Bill Friend's career in state government?
Biggest change would be technology, Barron. In my farewell speech, I told him that when I started in 1993, my first session, that I had a black Bakelite telephone. I don't think it was a rotary dial. I think it was push button, but I had a black phone hooked onto the wall, and I had the mail was delivered by the U.S. Postal Service. And in 26 years, I now have an iPad. I have a smartphone. I have emails. There's also Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, all this other stuff, so that the short leash that a representative or a senator is on is even shorter. And
there's nowhere to escape.
No, people can get to you, and I tell this story because sometimes I'll get an email that is extremely angry and profane and nasty, and if there's a phone number on it, what I do is call that person, and they say, they immediately start to back up and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Friend, but I was really mad." I said, "I can see that. I mean, all those 4-letter words tell me you're really upset with me. So what can I do?" And usually we can work it out. But I see that as maybe that's one of the reasons we struggle in society. We don't communicate person to person, voice to voice, man to man, man to woman. Maybe we need to get away from all the devices and try to actually work with people and not let our emotions dictate what we put out in emails and in the atmosphere.
Yeah, so, I've done more than one editorial calling the internet the modern day Tower of Babel, because that's just what you described.
That's a good one. That's a good one, because yes, it has many, many benefits, but there's a downside, and I worry about our younger generation and their communication ability, because
yeah.
But I would say you asked the biggest change. It's technology. I think the ability to communicate, and writing and making law used to be a really long, cumbersome thing that required huge piles of books. Now, the attorneys in LSA can go to their computer and they can amend a law, write a bill in no time flat, and it's amazing how quickly those things can be done. And I guess one of the things we did last Wednesday night was maybe think that we could move faster than we needed to, and it just didn't happen because once that human element was put in place, the process slowed down. And once it slowed down to a stop, we couldn't reverse it, and the time ran out. So I hate that. I wasn't looking to go back, but looks like we're going to.
Just when you thought you were out, they drag you back in.
Yeah, someone said they were blaming this whole thing on me, that this is my fault because I didn't want to leave, and that's not true.
You're going to miss it so much.
Well, I am. Let's say this publicly, that it has been my honor and my privilege to serve District 23 for 26 years, and I have seen District 23 go through 3 iterations. When I started, I went clear to Tipton. Then after the next redistricting, they shifted me and sent me up to Elkhart. And now, currently, it's Liberty Township in Fulton County and most of Miami County and a good chunk of Cass County. So it's much more compact now. And I've represented 9 counties in my career, so kind of like a congressional district. I made friends in every one, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the trust that the public put in me.
Well, we've also appreciated you over the years. You've always been perfectly willing to talk to us, and I think I've been talking to you for close to 20 years now on the radio, and you always give us a honest answer, and you don't dance around too much, and we've always appreciated that. Again, State Representative Bill Friend, we're going to let you go, but once the short session gets done, by all means, feel free to get back with us and let us know what we've wrought.
Okay, I'll be glad to do that, Barron.
Thank you very kindly, sir.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Stay dry.